They were just two poor boys from the mountains, hoping for a miracle and expecting none. When a charity raffle handed them the deed to a crumbling old storage shed, everyone laughed except them. But inside those rusted walls lay a secret, locked away for over 50 years, waiting for someone brave, or foolish, enough to uncover it. What started as a joke prize would soon turn into a journey of legacy, invention, and a truth that would forever change not just their lives but the town's. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And if stories like this spark something in you, hit that subscribe button. Because tomorrow's episode is even more unforgettable than this one. The wind kicked up dust around the base of the tin-roofed community center as the raffle drum clattered with its last few spins. Sam and Eli stood off to the side, their boots too worn for boys their age, and their hopes lower than the autumn Sunday. It wasn't that they expected to win. In fact, they hadn't expected much of anything since their mama passed the previous spring, and their uncle took them in on the condition they worked more than they talked. Sam had entered the raffle on a whim, dropping in the single free ticket he got from carrying groceries for old Miss Trudy. The prize? Deed to one retired storage shed, contents included. Most folks chuckled. Some joked it might be haunted. Others said it was probably full of rats and rust and nothing more. So when the announcer squinted at the winning stub and called out, "Samuel Thomas and Elijah Thomas, Box 38, Green Ridge," the laughter shifted. Some folks clapped, others stared. The boys just blinked. Sam's voice barely came out above a whisper. "We won?" A man in a dusty brown coat handed over a yellowed envelope. "Here's the deed. Location stamped on the back. Shed's yours now, boys." No one asked their age. No one asked if they had a plan. The truth was, they didn't. That evening, as the light dimmed and the hills cast long shadows across the valley, the two boys stood in front of a rounded, rust-covered structure just off the old access road shed Hassan for. Sam held the key. Eli held a flashlight. The padlock screeched open like it hadn't moved in decades. The rolling door moaned in protest as they shoved it up just enough to duck under. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. Mice skittered into corners. Metal bins, crates, and broken furniture filled most of the space, like a time capsule no one ever bothered to seal properly. But what caught Sam's eye wasn't the junk. It was the trunk. A green military-style footlocker sat at the back, its brass latches dull but intact. Eli nudged him. "Think there's treasure?" Sam shrugged. "Only one way to find out." They couldn't get it open that night. The lock was old, thick, and stubborn. But when Eli brushed off the top, a name was carved into the wood. A.J. Thomas. 1969. Sam froze. That's our last name. And just like that, the prize no one wanted had given them something they hadn't had in a long time, a reason to wonder. The next morning, the boys returned to the shed before the sun had fully crested the ridge. Eli had barely slept, too busy dreaming about hidden fortunes and secret messages. Sam, on the other hand, hadn't said much. He'd lain awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of their uncle's trailer, one thought circling like a hawk: A.J. Thomas. A name that might be more than coincidence. The air was colder now, and dew clung to the rusted edges of the rolling door as they heaved it open again. Light filtered in through holes in the roof, forming dusty shafts that gave the space an almost sacred stillness. They stepped over a broken stool and a pile of rotted magazines, heading straight for the green trunk. Sam had borrowed a pair of bolt cutters from Old Man Dorsey down at the gas station. He hadn't asked what it was for, and Sam didn't offer. With one steady motion, he clamped them around the lock and bit down. The old metal groaned, then snapped clean. Eli sucked in a breath. Moment of truth. Sam opened the lid slowly, half expecting rats or spiders to come spilling out. But there were no creatures, just layers thick military blankets folded tight, a tin box with a faded red cross on it, and beneath those, a small bundle wrapped in waxed cloth. Sam lifted it out carefully, the way you'd hold something too old to trust. Inside the bundle was a pocket-sized leather notebook, the kind with a button clasp and soft weather-worn pages. A brass key was looped through its spine with twine. And on the inside cover, written in black ink, were 4 words. "For the next Thomas boys." Eli's voice was soft. "It's meant for us." They sat on overturned crates, and began to flip through the pages. What they found wasn't gold, but something far rarer. Sketches, notes, measurements, ideas written in precise but passionate handwriting. It looked like a journal mixed with an engineer's blueprints. But for what, they weren't sure yet. One diagram caught Sam's attention. It looked like some kind of machine round, with wires and gears, and something labeled ignition housing. Another showed a long box buried under what looked like floorboards, marked with the note, hidden under God's light, access only when truth is ready. They didn't know what it meant, not yet. But the way Sam's hands trembled as he held those pages, and the way Eli leaned in like he'd found a window into something bigger, it was clear the shed wasn't just storage. It was a message, a mission. Sam looked at the brass key. This goes to something else, something still locked. Eli nodded. Then we find it. We open everything. And as the morning light crept further into the corners of the shed, the boys didn't see cobwebs or rust anymore. They saw possibility, and something even deeper than that, a connection. Someone, long before them, had known they'd come, had left them a beginning. All they had to do now was follow it. The next few days passed in a blur of dust and discovery. Sam and Eli spent every free hour inside the shed, cataloging every box, every rusted tool, every forgotten crate. Their uncle thought they were just messing around. But the boys knew better. This wasn't junk, it was a trailhead. On the third afternoon, buried beneath a stack of old radiator hoses, Sam found a metal case with peeling green paint. Inside was a folded canvas sheet, cracked at the edges, and when they unrolled it across the concrete floor, they found a map, hand-drawn, yellowed, with dozens of tiny notations. Eli crouched beside him. Is this the town? Sam nodded slowly. The roads were familiar, but not quite the same. Some were missing. Others had names they'd never heard of. A red X marked a spot near the edge of the shed's foundation, and beside it were scribbled words in faded ink. Power lives below. What kind of power? Eli asked. Sam shook his head. But in his chest, something stirred like the quiet pulse of an idea just beginning to wake up. They spent that evening tracing the floor of the shed, knocking on boards with a wrench, searching for anything hollow. And just when they were about to give up, Eli's boot landed on a seam in the concrete that didn't match the rest. A rectangle, faint, but real. There, Eli whispered. The brass key from the notebook fit perfectly into a rusted metal slot they hadn't noticed until now. It clicked, sharp and final. But the hatch wouldn't open, not yet. It was sealed tight, years of dust and debris packed in around the edges. They stood over it in silence. Tomorrow, Sam said, we bring shovels. But even as they walked home in the fading light, both boys felt it. The line between curiosity and purpose had shifted. This wasn't about winning a prize anymore. It was about unlocking a story someone had died trying to tell. They returned the next morning with shovels, a crowbar, and their hearts pounding harder than they cared to admit. The hatch opened slowly, groaning like it hadn't seen daylight in a generation. Beneath was a narrow set of wooden steps, weathered but intact. The air that drifted up smelled of machine oil and something older. Memory, maybe. They looked at each other once, then climbed down. The hidden room wasn't large, but it was precise, built like a bunker, with walls lined in metal shelving, and a single hanging bulb that still worked when Sam flipped the switch. It flickered to life, revealing rows of labeled jars, gears, wires, and a half-finished machine in the center of the room. It looked like a cross between a generator and a radio. Beside it sat a toolbox, and within that, a packet of letters tied with twine. Sam pulled one free. The envelope read, "To whoever finds this, my name is Amos Jeremiah Thomas." Eli's eyes widened. A.J. Thomas. Sam read aloud. "If you're reading this, it means you carry my name. And if that's true, then you might be the only ones left who can finish what I started." The room seemed to grow still, like even the air was listening. Amos's letter spoke of small-town suspicion, of inventions too advanced for their time, of dreams he had to bury literally. But most of all, it spoke of hope. That one day, his own kin might find what he left behind and do what he never could, ignite it. Eli glanced around the room. This was his workshop. Sam nodded, the weight of it all settling into his bones. And now it's ours. And from somewhere deep in the walls, or maybe just inside their hearts, the past whispered, "Keep going." The next week blurred into calloused hands, scraped knuckles, and late nights under the flicker of that single workshop bulb. Sam and Eli couldn't stay away, even when their uncle barked about chores or when their schoolwork suffered. Something in that shed pulled at them deeper than curiosity. It was purpose, wrapped in mystery and sealed with family blood. They started with the journals. Amos Thomas hadn't just been a tinkerer. He was an inventor. Page after page detailed machines ahead of their time, some designed for farming, others for communication. But one machine appeared again and again, sketched from multiple angles with increasing refinement, labeled Project Lantern. It wasn't fully built, but the frame stood in the center of the hidden room. A tall cylindrical structure with coiled copper wiring, battery ports, and a central compartment that, according to the journals, was meant to hold something called a pulse core. But there was no core. "What is it supposed to do?" Eli asked one night, sweat, streaked and greasy from hours of cleaning the parts. Sam shrugged, thumbing through one of the older notebooks. Amos kept saying it could bring light where there is none. Said it could change the way energy was shared. Make it free. Clean. Endless. Eli's brow furrowed. "Like a power source?" "Like hope in a bottle," Sam said softly. But Amos hadn't finished it. His last entries were rushed, incomplete. They talked of pressure from town leaders. Of being told to stay quiet or else. Then they stopped entirely. No more blueprints. No final explanation. Just silence. Still, the machine was real. Tangible. Waiting. They made it their mission to restore what they could. Rewiring. Cleaning. Reading. Testing. Piece by piece, the boys worked like men with something to prove, not to the world, but to the past. One evening, as they pried open an old drawer in the far corner of the bunker, Eli gasped. Inside was a velvet-wrapped bundle and a note that read, "Too dangerous to finish alone. If you've come this far, you may already understand why." They unwrapped the bundle carefully and found what looked like a battery encased in thick glass, faintly glowing. A low hum pulsed from within. The label on the side read, "Prototype Pulse Core Lantern Vi 1. 7. Sam looked at Eli. "We finish it." And just like that, the machine wasn't just a relic, it was a calling. News travels fast in small towns, especially when two boys start hauling generators and copper coils into a storage shed most folks forgot about. At first, people stared from a distance, whispered, wondered if Sam and Eli were up to no good. But then came Mr. Harlan, the retired auto shop teacher, walking with a limp and carrying a rusted-out voltmeter. "Heard you boys are fixing something special," he said, peering inside the bunker. "Mind if I take a look?" He stayed 5 hours. Next was Mara Doyle, the librarian, who'd known their mother back in school. She brought soup in a thermos and a stack of engineering manuals older than either of the boys. "Figured this might help," she said with a wink. "I always believed in the Thomas family. Just never thought it'd be the next generation that proved me right." Even their uncle, stubborn and skeptical, started dropping them off at the shed earlier. He never said much, just handed Sam a paper sack with 2 sandwiches inside and muttered, "Be careful around wires." But that was something. The more they worked, the more the machine started to resemble the blueprints. Slowly, deliberately, the lantern came to life. Eli called it the heart, for the way it pulsed, even without being powered. It vibrated with potential. It felt alive. One afternoon, as Sam adjusted a copper junction, he paused. "You think Amos knew we'd find it?" Eli looked up from his soldering. "He left us a key. A note. Blueprints. Maybe he didn't know us exactly, but he hoped. I think hope can echo across time." Sam smiled. "Sounds like something Mom used to say." Their mom. She died with grease under her. Nails, too. She'd taught Sam how to change a tire, and Eli how to tell when an engine was lying. She used to say, "We don't fix cars. Boys, we fix what moves people." For the first time in months, her memory didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a foundation. By the end of the week, the lantern stood complete, at least physically. Every bolt matched the diagrams, every coil hummed. The pulse core clicked into its housing with a satisfying hiss. But one step remained: ignition. They stared at the small lever marked activate. Neither moved. "You think it'll work?" Eli asked. Sam swallowed. "I think we're about to find out." But they didn't pull it. Not yet. The shed had become more than a workshop. It had become sacred. And something told them that once the lantern came to life, nothing would be the same again. They decided to wait one more night. Tomorrow, they would flip the switch. And either they'd light up something forgotten, or wake something. No, one was ready for. The next morning arrived quiet and golden, the kind of sunrise that wrapped the mountain in stillness like a secret. Sam and Eli stood at the edge of the open bunker, staring down at what they'd built. The lantern stood ready tall, humming, whole. Sam's hand hovered over the activation lever. "You sure?" Eli nodded. "Not even a little." They laughed, a nervous, shaky kind of sound, but it broke the tension just enough. Sam gripped the handle, counted to 3 and pulled. The machine hissed, then groaned, its copper coils pulsing with energy as the pulse core lit from within. A sound filled the shed low, resonant, like a heartbeat in metal. Then the light came. It wasn't bright in the traditional sense. It didn't flood the room like a bulb or blind them like a flash. It grew, slowly and warmly, from the center outward, casting soft ripples of illumination across every surface. The walls glowed. Their skin shimmered. But more than light, time, brought feeling. The air itself seemed to vibrate full of warmth, of motion, of something almost alive. Eli stepped back, eyes wide. "It's working." Sam exhaled. "We actually did it." They didn't know what the lantern was doing. Not exactly. But it was undeniable. Power radiated from it. Their old battery packs began to charge without being plugged in. The dead light bulb in the corner flickered on. Even the rust on the nearby toolbox seemed softer, less sharp. They let it run for 30 minutes, then powered it down. The core dimmed, the hum fell quiet, and the world returned to normal, but something inside them had changed. They knew it couldn't stay secret. By the end of the day, word had spread again. Mr. Harlan returned with an extension cord and 2 old batteries. The lantern charged both in under 5 minutes silently, cleanly. Then came others. A farmer with a busted solar panel. A teacher with a dead laptop. A man from the next town over who'd heard about some boys lighting up miracles in a junk shed. What started as whispers became visits. What began as visits became contributions. People brought tools, parts, blueprints of their own. Some brought food. Others brought stories like the mailman who remembered Amos Thomas from when he was a kid. Said Amos used to talk about free energy for every home. Folks laughed at him, the man said, rubbing the back of his neck. But maybe he just needed time. Or grandsons brave enough to try. Eli smiled. "We didn't know we were his grandsons when we started." "But you are now," the man replied. "And that changes everything." By week's end, the shed was no longer a forgotten relic. It was a workshop, a community hub, a place where people came not just to fix things, but to believe in them again. The lantern sat at the center, quiet, pulsing, patient. And Sam and Eli, for the first time in their lives, weren't just poor boys from nowhere. They were the keepers of something that mattered. The days turned longer, warmer. Spring spilled over the valley, and still the visitors came: tinkerers, dreamers, skeptics who walked in with raised eyebrows and left with softened eyes. No one could explain exactly how the lantern worked, and that only deepened the magic of it. Sam started keeping a log. Every time the lantern restored a dead appliance, recharged a phone, or powered a tool, he recorded it. The results were the same every time: silent, instant, clean power. Eli had an idea. Build another. But as they pored over Amos's blueprints, it became clear this wasn't some easy copy-paste project. The parts were hand-machined. The pulse core had no instructions. The core, in fact, might be the only one in existence. Still, that didn't stop the town from trying. What they lacked in answers, they made up for in will. A high school science teacher brought in his robotics team. A retired electrician offered to rewire the shed. Even kids from the Powsons, Next county started showing up, curious about the light that doesn't burn. It wasn't just about the machine anymore. It was about hope shared, rebuilt, passed on. And in the middle of it all were Sam and Eli. They'd gone from scavenging parts behind their uncle's trailer to leading a team of volunteers. Sam took to planning. Eli explained the inner workings. Neither of them had ever felt seen before. Now people looked to them like they were something more. One evening, Mara Doyle stopped by again, this time with a small wooden box. "I think this belongs here," she said. Inside was a black and white photograph. Amos Thomas, maybe 20 years old, standing beside a younger woman smiling, grease, streaked, proud. On the back, it read, "Amos, June, summer 67, we'll build it together." Eli swallowed hard. "That's our grandma." Sam nodded slowly. "She never told us." Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. Maybe she was waiting for the right moment. Or maybe she didn't think the world would listen until now. They framed the photo and hung it on the wall beside the lantern. That night, as the shed dimmed and the boys cleaned up tools, they stood side by side in front of the glowing machine. "We're not just finishing his work," Eli whispered. "We're becoming part of it." Sam nodded. "And we're not alone anymore." The lantern pulsed behind them, steady and warm. Not just a machine. A beacon. And tomorrow, they would show the entire town what a forgotten dream could become when it was finally given light. The morning of the unveiling felt like the whole mountain had stopped to breathe. A gentle mist clung to the treetops, and the sun broke through in soft streaks, warming the rusted tin roof of Shed Hassan 4. Sam stood outside with his hands deep in his jacket pockets, eyes fixed on the horizon as if searching for something more than weather. Beside him, Eli paced, chewing on the inside of his cheek, way he did when he was nervous and trying not to show it. They had decided. Today was the day the town would see it, the lantern, the machine that had turned from forgotten blueprints into a miracle that pulsed quietly in the bunker below their feet. Over the past weeks, people had come in trickles, offering help, food, memories. But today, Sam and Eli had sent word out intentionally. "Come see what's been waiting for decades." By noon, nearly 100 people had gathered. Families sat on folding chairs. Kids dangled their legs off the tailgates of parked trucks. The mayor stood stiffly near the back, arms crossed. Their uncle arrived last, taking his place against the fence post, like a man who didn't want to admit he cared but couldn't stay away. Eli nudged Sam. "Time." Sam stepped forward and cleared his throat. He didn't need a microphone. The shed's quiet gave him all the volume he needed. "This started as a joke," he said, voice steady. "A shed nobody wanted. A raffle we didn't think we'd win. But inside that shed, we found something more than junk. We found our grandfather's work, his life's dream, and we brought it back." He gestured to the open bunker behind him, where the lantern stood like a sleeping monument, copper coils glinting in the sunlight. Eli stepped up. He called it the lantern. He believed it could change how people lived. Give power freely, light without burn, energy without debt. Sam nodded. "Today, you'll see what he meant." He stepped to the ignition lever and paused. Eli placed a hand on the console. Together, they pulled. The lantern stirred like it had been waiting for applause. The pulse core glowed deep red, then orange, then steady gold. A hum filled the air. Not loud, not mechanical. It was low and warm, like music in your bones. Light radiated gently across the room, flowing out from the core in waves that touched the walls, the tools, the skin of everyone watching. People gasped. The strings of lights hanging from the ceiling flickered on. A small heater powered up. Phones left on the table beside them began to charge without a single cord. The mayor stepped forward, blinking. How is this possible? We're still figuring it out," Eli replied honestly. "But it works," Sam added. "It's real." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Awe, confusion, skepticism, wonder. Then came the question that changed everything. Who owns it? It was the mayor again, voice tighter now. Something like this. "You boys can't keep it to yourselves. There are safety protocols, regulations." Before the murmurs could sour into doubt, Mr. Harlan, the retired auto shop teacher, stepped forward. They're not trying to profit. They're trying to finish what Amos Thomas started. And if anyone deserves to own it, it's the boys who rebuilt it with nothing but grease and faith. Another voice. Let the town vote. Another. They've already earned it. The mayor, sensing the tide had turned, backed off with a forced smile. But Sam's focus had shifted. He was staring at a blinking sequence on the side panel, one they hadn't seen before. He checked the old journal, page 57. Final bolt must be placed to release stored charge, it read. Not for energy, for memory. He turned to Eli. There's one more piece. They rushed to the workbench, where a metal cylinder, something they'd dismissed as scrap, sat untouched. Sam grabbed it, heart racing. They opened the base panel of the lantern. The slot matched perfectly. Sam held the bolt over the opening. You ready? Eli swallowed hard. Do it. Sam clicked it into place. The lantern responded instantly, one final surge, pulsing through its frame like a breath held too long and finally exhaled. The hum turned to a deep, resonant tone. And then a voice, crackling through the speaker beside the lantern, worn but unmistakably real. This is Amos Jeremiah Thomas, the voice said. If you're hearing this, it means the work wasn't lost. It means you found the faith I left behind. This machine was never about power. It was about connection, about giving something to the people no one else would. The town stood frozen. Amos's voice softened. To whoever you are, you did it. Thank you. Silence fell again. But this time, it was full. Full of pride. Full of something sacred. Sam and Eli looked at each other, their eyes wet with disbelief and wonder. And the crowd didn't clap. They didn't need to. Because in that moment, everyone understood. This wasn't a demonstration. It was a homecoming. That night, long after the crowd had gone home and the last string of lights dimmed across the field, Sam sat alone inside the bunker. The lantern hummed softly beside him, not like a machine running, but like a heart still beating. The final bolt, the memory bolt, had changed everything. Not in a flashy way. There were no fireworks. No dramatic pulses of energy tearing through the sky. What it released was far more powerful. Proof. A voice from the past. The undeniable truth that Amos Jeremiah Thomas had dreamed of something better, built it with his bare hands, and somehow, through the hands of two boys he never got to meet, finished what time tried to bury. Eli came in quietly, holding 2 steaming mugs of cocoa. You're not going to sleep tonight, are you? Sam half smiled. Not a chance. Eli handed him a mug and sat beside him on the bench. For a moment, they didn't say anything. The air inside the bunker was warm, filled with the smell of copper, oil, and something older like hope, worn into the walls. You think he knew? Eli finally asked. That we'd find it? Sam took a sip. I don't know if he knew it'd be us, but I think he knew someone would. Someone who'd care enough to finish what he started. They both stared at the lantern still, glowing quietly. The next morning, the story broke wide. Someone had filmed the demonstration. A video titled, 2 Boys, 1 Invention, and the Voice of Their Grandfather, hit social media. Within 24 hours, it passed 100,000 views. By the weekend, it had over 1 million. Messages came pouring in from engineers, inventors, scientists, journalists, offers to buy the lantern, demands to bring it to market, promises of fame, money, scholarships. One company offered to fly them out for a full product licensing deal. Sam deleted the message. Eli didn't want to sell it either. The lantern wasn't a commodity. It wasn't for profit. It was a legacy, and legacies didn't have price tags. Instead, they stayed in Green Ridge. The shed became something else entirely. Part museum, part learning lab, part memorial. A place where people came not to gawk but to grow. Volunteers helped build workbenches and install extra wiring. Mara Doyle started holding weekend reading circles, with engineering books for local teens. Mr. Harlan came back every Tuesday to teach soldering basics. And the boys? They started designing Lantern too. They didn't try to replicate the pulse core that technology, even with Amos's notes, was far beyond what they understood. But they focused on what they could share. The blueprints, the circuit designs, the principles. They created an open-source project, lanternlight.org. Every diagram, journal entry, and schematic from Amos's notebooks was scanned and uploaded free for anyone in the world to read, download, and build from. Soon, a student in Oregon had replicated the energy pulse. A team in Kenya used the blueprint to power a rural water pump. Emails came from Brazil, Vietnam, Sweden, and South Africa. Eli grinned at the growing map on their wall, dotted with push pins. The lantern's everywhere now. Sam nodded. Exactly where it was meant to be. One day, their uncle brought over a wooden box. No explanation. Just left it on the workbench and said, "Your mother wanted you to have this when the time was right." Inside were letters, dozens of them. From their mom to Amos, back and forth. She'd known. She'd found the trunk when she was younger, but the machine was far from complete. Amos had died before he could show her how to finish it. She never told the boys not because she didn't believe in them, but because she believed the moment would come when they would choose to believe in themselves. Sam cried for the first time in months. Not from sadness, but because something finally fit. That night, he and Eli framed one of her letters and hung it beside the photo of Amos and June. And above it, they stenciled a new phrase onto the bunker wall. "Legacy isn't something you inherit. It's something you continue." The mayor came around eventually. Whether from public pressure or genuine change of heart, he offered the boys a permanent grant, enough to expand the lab, pay, volunteers, and fund new projects. Sam and Eli declined the check, but accepted the goodwill. They didn't want funding. They wanted freedom. And freedom is what they built. A year passed. Then 2. The shed never closed. Lantern 2 became Lantern 3. They started teaching kids from other towns. Even built a program called Fix It Forward, offering restoration workshops for families who'd lost homes, jobs, or direction. The Thomas name no longer raised eyebrows. It raised heads. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled across the gravel lot, a little girl no older than 7 stood outside the shed holding her father's hand. She stared at the glowing lantern, and then at Eli. "Did you build that?" she asked, wide-eyed. He smiled. "We helped." "Can I build one too?" Sam stepped out of the bunker, wiping his hands on a rag. "That's the whole point." And just like that, another spark was lit. Because what Amos began, Sam and Eli finished. And what they finished, they gave away. Not for attention, not for profit, but because light, real light, isn't meant to be hoarded. It's meant to travel. Through hands, through hearts, through time. The lantern glowed on, steady and eternal. A reminder that even in the darkest corners of forgotten sheds, beneath rusted bolts and buried blueprints, the most powerful force in the world is someone choosing to believe again.